It was a warm afternoon in Baker Street, and the air hung heavy with the smell of horse traffic drifting in from Marylebone Road. My friend Sherlock Holmes sat opposite me, lean and hawk-like, his pipe curling forth a thin wisp of smoke. To any stranger, the silence of our room might have seemed dull, but I knew full well that silence in Holmes was but the breeding ground of deduction. Coty. For my own part, I occupied myself with the notes of our recent adventures, forever trying to shape them into accounts that might do my companion's brilliance some justice. Yet as often, I found myself watching Holmes with admiration, wondering if ever I should understand how his mind drew lightning from the simplest clouds.
Watson, your pen scratches like a restless mouse. I should be most gratified if the annals you compose one day show the world how much practice lies behind what they so romantically call instinct.
Holmes, I never failed to make clear that your powers rest upon reason, not magic. Still, to us mere mortals, deduction as you perform it must ever appear wondrous.
Elementary, my dear fellow. The wonderful is but the commonplace when seen with clarity. Consider even now, by the angle of your watch chain and the small stain upon your cuff, I could recount the contents of your breakfast. Huh?
Indeed, I confess I had kippers at Simpson's, but I shall not ask you to prove it lest you embarrass me further. At this moment, there came a knock at the door, brisk, businesslike, and with a curious undertone of urgency. Mrs. Hudson ushered in Inspector Lestrade of Scotland Yard, his sharp features drawn into a look of mingled perplexity and irritation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson. I hope I do not intrude, but we have a case which, though trifling in appearance, has grown upon my nerves like a riddle that laughs at me.
Pray, Inspector, take a seat. If a riddle laughs at Scotland Yard, I should much like to hear its joke.
Holmes motioned Lestrade toward the chair opposite the fireplace, and the inspector sat, wiping the perspiration from his brow.
You know me, Mr. Holmes. I don't chase shadows, nor trouble you with petty vandalism. Yet there is a fellow in London who goes about smashing busts of the Emperor Napoleon. It has happened not once, not twice, but several times, and always in different quarters of the city.
I raised my brows. The notion of a madman wandering London, wreaking vengeance on plaster effigies, seemed at once absurd and somehow sinister. Surely, Holmes, I said, this is but the work of some lunatic with a French hatred, or a nationalist with too much ale in his head.
Possibly, Watson. Yet let us hear all.
The first instance was at Moss Hudson's shop in the Kennington Road. A bust of Napoleon was smashed in the night. Then again, at Dr. Formon, Barnicot Surgery in Low Bixter Road, two similar busts were destroyed. And only yesterday, another incident occurred in a private house in Chiswick. The manner is always the same. The bust broken to fragments, nothing else disturbed, no attempt at robbery. There must be some design behind it, though heaven take me if I see what.
And the busts themselves? Were they identical?
Yes, from the same mold, plaster, about 2 feet high. A common enough ornament, but somehow the fellow is possessed against them. We have caught no glimpse of him, nor any clue worth naming.
Holmes leaned forward, the light of interest kindling in his grey eyes. To me, it was always a sign that he scented in trivialities the spore of something greater.
It is curious. A crime that profits no man, yet is pursued with method. You are right, Inspector. This is no ordinary lunacy. Tell me, what of the latest outrage?
It was at the home of Mr. Harker, journalist. He purchased a bust of Napoleon from Morse Hudson. Last night, a man broke into his house and shattered it in the hallway. Mr. Harker himself, roused by the noise, rushed down and swears he saw the intruder make off into the night.
Did he describe the fellow?
A swarthy man, dark moustache, but little else. It was all too quick. And here is the strangest matter. Harker found blood upon the fragments, as though the criminal had wounded himself in his frenzy.
Blood. Then he leaves a trace of his own body behind. That, at least, is a human too.
Quite so, Watson. A man may disguise his clothes, his voice, his name, but never the red signature that flows from his veins.
Lestrade shifted in his seat impatiently.
Well, Mr. Holmes, I thought it might amuse you. It's not a murder, nor a robbery, but it has a touch of oddity. Would you care to look into it?
Amuse me? My dear Inspector, you bring me a case rich with human motive disguised as farce. Yes, I shall come at once. Watson, your hat. There is work afoot.
Thus it was that we set forth from Baker Street, a curious trio. Holmes, with his eager stride, Thought, with his brisk authority, and I following with notebook in pocket, resolved to trace in detail every turn of Holmes's reasoning. The evening air was cool. As we drove toward Kennington Road, the lamps flickering like sentinels against the growing dusk.
You see, Watson, Holmes remarked, as the cab rattled on, madness is seldom methodical. When a man repeats a crime with uniform detail, we must seek a motive beneath the apparent madness. A lunatic is varied in his delusion. A schemer is monotonous in his aim.
Then you suspect this is no mere act of rage against Napoleon's memory?
Precisely. Hung. Napoleon has long been a target of British jest, but never before has he provoked housebreaking. There is something hidden within these busts, or something connected with them, that drives this pursuit.
But why busts from one mold, Holmes?
That, my dear Watson, is the hinge upon which the door turns. The answer lies not in Napoleon, but in plaster.
His words stirred my imagination, but their meaning eluded me. The cab drew up before Morse Hudson's shop, where the proprietor, a nervous man, received us with wide eyes and eager complaint.
I never knew such trouble for a tradesman, gentlemen. Busts of emperors are honest ornaments, and now this villain smashes them as though they were crockery. My reputation will be ruined if folk think my stock bewitched.
Calm yourself, Mr. Hudson. How many of these busts did you sell? And to whom?
6 in all. 2 to Dr. Barnicot, 1 to Mr. Harker, the others to private gentlemen. All alike. All from the same mould, sir, which I had from Gelder Co, Stepney.
A valuable piece of information. The supply is limited and the purchasers few. Watson noted well.
I dutifully entered the particulars. Pray! Marveling at how Holmes seized upon the smallest detained with the hunger of a hawk sighting prey. Thus began the singular case of the 6 Napoleons, a case that from fragments of plaster led us down, Haki, the darker paths of crime and retribution. As I write now, I recall the smell of dust in Morse Hudson's shop, the nervous twitch of his fingers upon the counter, and Holmes's keen gaze sweeping the shelves as though the secret of the whole affair might leap forth from between rows of humble statuettes. Little did I know then that behind these broken busts lay the shadow of blood and the glimmer of a jewel that had once cost men's lives. The following morning broke crisp and grey, a veil of mist hanging over the city. Holmes was already astir when I rose, his lean figure framed at the window, fingers steepled, eyes far away. There was a peculiar intensity about him, as though his mind had worked through the night upon the problem Lestrade had laid before us.
Watson, the plaster bust is to this affair what the shell is to the nut. We must crack it carefully, lest we overlook the kernel within. Dress quickly, for Inspector Lestrade has arranged for us to meet Dr. Barnicot in Brixton.
Sparrow Barnicot, you say, the gentleman who owned 2 of the broken busts?
Just so. It is always my principle to follow the line of attack. Our adversary has shown us the points he values most. We shall examine them in order.
Within the hour, we were driving southward through the drizzle, Lestrade opposite us in the cab, his sharp eyes darting from one foggy street corner to the next, as though the criminal might spring from the mist itself.
Mr. Holmes, I must say, I cannot for the life of me understand why a sane man would risk prison merely to break a few plaster figures. And yet he does it with the determination of a safecracker after gold.
That is because, Inspector, the gold may indeed be hidden in plaster. The question is, how and why, and in which bust lies his true quarry?
We alighted at Dr. Barnicot's surgery, a neat establishment near Lower Brixton Road. Doctor himself, a brisk and earnest man, received us with a mixture of irritation and bewilderment.
Gentlemen, I cannot imagine what mischief I have invited into my respectable practice. 2 busts, both shattered in as many days. First, the one in my consulting room, then another at my home in Kennington. Nothing stolen, no sign of forced entry beyond the violence to those figures. It is intolerable.
Pray describe the incidents in detail, Doctor. This.
The first occurred in the night. My servants heard a clash in the consulting room, but by the time we descended, the villain was gone and the bust lay in fragments. The second was the following morning. I myself opened my house door and found that the bust in the hall had been dashed to pieces, though the lock showed no tampering, as though the fellow had flown in and out like a phantom. But
And both busts, precisely like those from Moss Hudson's shop.
identical, sir. I bought them both from Hudson some months ago.
Holmes examined the shards with keen interest, turning over the fragments of plaster with his long fingers, tapping them lightly against the tabletop as though listening for some secret resonance.
Watson, note that the fracture lines are consistent. The blows were delivered with precision, swift, deliberate, and with knowledge of how to strike so as to shatter the head. This is not the work of an errant drunkard with a stick. It is surgical, one might say, like your profession, Dr. Barnicott.
Then you think he seeks something inside the bust?
What else? No man risks Gao for plaster dust. But what treasure is hidden, and in which specimen, that is the matter.
We left Barnagot in a state of indignation, and as we stepped once more into the foggy street, Holmes drew his cloak about him. Ow!
Our adversary grows desperate, Watson. Each bust destroyed narrows the field. There were 6 in all, remember? Already 4 lie in shards. 2 remain whole. If we do not act swiftly, the mystery will be solved by brute force, and we shall be left with empty hands.
Aye, then we must learn where the last 2 busts were sold.
Precisely, to Stepney and Gelder Co, whence the moulds came.
Before we could set our course for Stepney, however, a messenger boy came running breathless along the pavement, waving a note. It was addressed to Inspector Lestrade, who tore it open with a frown.
By heaven! Another outrage, this time with murder. A man found dead in the yard of Mr. Harker's house in Chiswick, the very place we heard of yesterday.
Murder, I exclaimed. Then our lunatic has turned assassin?
Holmes's eyes flashed with the fierce light. I knew so well the gleam that came when the chase grew angorous and the scent strong. Not lunacy, Watson, but necessity. Come, Inspector, the game has drawn blood. To Chiswick with all speed.
We drove at a furious pace, the wheels clattering over the cobblestones, my heart thudding with a mixture of dread and anticipation. When at last we reached the modest dwelling of Mr. Harker, a small crowd had gathered, murmuring around the gates. Lestrade pushed us through, and there in the yard lay a ghastly sight. A man sprawled lifeless, his dark moustache matted with blood, his eyes staring wide in eternal terror. And yo, Charo! Beside him, the fragments of yet another Napoleon bust lay scattered, the plaster dust mingling with the crimson stain of death.
It was dreadful, gentlemen, dreadful. I heard the clash once more, and this time when I rushed out, I found him lying there, stone dead, as you see. He must have broken the bust in his frenzy, and in the struggle, Lord knows how, his life was ended.
He is no Englishman, that's clear. A foreign face if ever I saw one. Italian, perhaps.
I bent beside the corpse, examining the wound, a deep stab below the left collarbone, the work of a knife, swift and deadly. Not an accident, Lestrade. This man was slain by deliberate hand.
And observe, Watson, the pocket turned out, yet no valuables remain. Our assassin left in haste, but not before accomplishing his task.
Then he was not the smasher, but another hand entirely, perhaps rival to the first?
A plausible theory. The man we see is the pursuer, not the quarry. He smashed the bust, but what he sought within it he never found. Instead, death overtook him, and somewhere his adversary slipped away into the night, the true prize concealed.
A prize? Then you mean there is indeed something hidden in these busts?
I mean, Inspector, that murder is never for plaster. There is a gem of truth set in this crude stone, and we must pry it out before more lives are lost.
The police carried the body away, and Harker, white as chalk, retreated into his house. Holmes lingered in the yard, his keen gaze sweeping the ground. At last he stooped, picking up a tiny fragment. He held it before me.
See here, Watson, a smear upon the plaster. Not blood, but varnish. The busts were coated to seal them. And yet,
And yet the varnisher is disturbed as though tampered with before it was broken.
excellent, Watson, your eye grows keener. Yes, tampered with, perhaps to conceal something within. Each bust is a shell. One must hold the kernel. Our task is to discover which.
Darkness had fallen by the time we returned to Baker Street. Holmes paced the sitting room like a caged hound, pausing only to strike a match to his pipe, then striding once more.
Consider, Watson, the man dead in Chiswick is but a pawn. Behind him stands a larger force, perhaps a gang, perhaps a single mastermind. The busts are 6, 4 are broken, 2 remain. We must trace them without delay.
And you believe the hidden treasure is in one of the 2 surviving busts?
It is inevitable. Our foe has narrowed the field. We must be swifter than he.
I confess that I felt the thrill of the hunt as keenly as any soldier before battle. Though I had faced wounds and blood on many a field, there was something uniquely electric in the pursuit of crime with Holmes, the certainty that beneath every trivial detail lay the seed of revelation. And thus part 2 of our strange adventure closed, with a corpse in Chiswick, 4 busts shattered, 2 remaining, and Holmes more resolute than ever to follow the trail of plaster to its deadly heart. The morning dawned pale and uncertain, as though London herself waited for Holmes's verdict upon the strange affair of the broken busts. I found my friend at the breakfast table, his long fingers busy with telegram forms, his coffee untasted beside him.
Watson, we cannot afford delay. The surviving busts are 2 in number, and if they are broken before we reach them, our quarry escapes us altogether. I have wired Gelder Co. in Stepney to expect us. Finish your coffee and let us be gone.
Holmes, do you truly believe there is some priceless object hidden in these plaster figures?
I believe, my dear fellow, that a man does not kill with the knife merely to scatter dust. The gem is in the casket. The difficulty is to discover which casket holds it.
Soon Lestrade joined us, punctual as ever, though with a look of harried impatience.
I hope, Mr. Holmes, you are not leading me upon a wild goose chase. Scotland Yard is not in the habit of chasing plaster figures through the streets of London.
Nor is Sherlock Holmes, Inspector. When I run, it is because the scent is strong. Come, we must follow it to Stepney.
The drive eastward carried us through the teeming arteries of the city, past warehouses and wharves, until at last we reached the yard of Gelder Co., the statuary works from which Morse Hudson had obtained his stock.
Good day, gentlemen. Yes, I recall the order. 6 busts of the Emperor Napoleon, all from the same mould. They were cast here by one of our Italian workmen some months ago.
His name?
That was a clever fellow with a chisel, but a rogue, I fear, who was dismissed not long after, having fallen foul of the law.
Gee, the law, you say? What charge?
Assault, I believe, in some drunken quarrel. He spent a month in prison. Since then, we have not seen him.
Holmes exchanged a glance with Lestrade, and I saw in his eyes that spark which told me a new thread had joined the pattern.
So, Watson, we perceive the outlines of our drama. Beppo casts the busts, 6 in number. He is arrested and sent to prison. Upon his release, he seeks out each bust with desperate haste. Why? Because something he concealed in them before his imprisonment must now be recovered.
A jewel, perhaps?
Most likely. Some precious object, small enough to be hidden in plaster, valuable enough to drive a man to murder. We shall confirm our theory by discovering the last 2 busts before Beppo does.
Lestrade scratched his chin, half admiring, half skeptical.
You may be right, Mr. Holmes, but busts are not coins, easy to hide and harder to trace. Do you know where the last 2 lie?
Indeed, Inspector. Morse Hudson gave us the purchasers' names. One bust went to a Mr. Sandiford, a collector, at Reading. The other remains unsold in a shop at the Kennington Road. We must divide our forces.
Which shall we visit first? And ready.
The shop, Watson. The bust still there is in greatest peril, for Beppo's hand may already be upon it. To Kennington.
We arrived to find the shop quiet, its windows dim with dust. Within, however, the proprietor had but just sold the last Napoleon bust.
A gentleman purchased it this very morning, sir, paid cash and carried it away himself. He seemed in quite a hurry.
Holmes's eyes gleamed. Describe this gentleman.
Dark hair, foreign look about him, wore a soft hat pulled low.
Beppo, I exclaimed.
Undoubtedly. We are behind him by a single step. But one bust remains, the one at Reading. We must guard it as though it were a crown jewel.
That very afternoon, Holmes dispatched a telegram to Mr. Sandiford of Reading, entreating him most urgently to safeguard his bust of Napoleon and to expect our arrival.
Watson, we are upon the verge. Tonight we go to Reading. If Beppo seeks his prize there, we shall be waiting.
The train bore us westward through the twilight, Lestrade dozing opposite, Holmes silent and absorbed. For my own part, I gazed out at the darkening fields, my thoughts dwelling upon the strange concatenation of events that had led us from mere vandalism to bloodshed and pursuit. At Reading, we were met by Mr. Manassas Sandiford, a scholarly-looking gentleman with spectacles and a somewhat anxious air.
Gentlemen, I confess I am at a loss. I received your telegram and have guarded the bust as you asked. It sits in my drawing room safe and sound, though why anyone should covet it, I cannot imagine. Deuce!
You will soon perceive, Mr. Sandiford. Might we see it at once?
We entered the drawing room, where upon the mantelpiece stood the familiar likeness of Napoleon, cold, impassive, a little ridiculous, and yet in that moment it seemed to me as ominous as the Sphinx itself.
Holmes approached it reverently, as though it were some sacred relic, then turned to us with a grave smile. Here, gentlemen, is the last of the 6 Napoleons. If fortune favors us, it is also the prize for which blood has been spilt.
And if it is not Holmes?
Then our Italian friend would have risked all for nothing. But I do not think fortune will mock us so cruelly.
At that instant, a sound startled us, the creak of a window shutter, the faint scuff of a footstep outside. Holmes raised a hand for silence, his eyes narrowing.
He is here.
Lestrade sprang toward the door, but Holmes restrained him with a gesture.
Patience, Inspector. Let the moth draw near the flame. Watson, take your revolver in readiness.
My heart pounded as I slipped my hand into my pocket, feeling the cold steel of my revolver. The air in the room seemed charged with tension, the bust of Napoleon looming above us like some mute witness to the drama. A shadow passed the window, a hand tested the latch. Then with sudden violence, the window burst open and a man sprang inside, a light dark figure, his face wide with desperation.
Beppo.
The intruder leapt toward the mantelpiece, but before his hand could reach the bust, Naum Bates, like coughing. With a swift movement, he seized the man's wrist, twisting it so that the knife he held clattered to the floor. Lestrade rushed forward, and together they bore him down, struggling, until at last he lay bound and panting at our feet.
Well, Mr. Holmes, it seems your plaster smashing lunatic is no phantom after all. We have him safe enough now.
Yes, Inspector, but let us not be hasty. The true treasure is not the man, but what he thought. Watson, hand me that bust.
With trembling hands, I lifted the plaster figure from the mantelpiece and set it upon the table. Holmes took up a hammer, his eyes shining with anticipation.
Now, gentlemen, we shall see the reason for this strange crusade of shattered emperors.
With a swift blow, Holmes struck the bust. The plaster split, and from its hollow interior something glittered in the lamplight, a shard of green fire, dazzling, brilliant. Holmes held it aloft between finger and thumb.
Behold, the famous black pearl of the Borgias.
A murmur of astonishment escaped us all. The pearl, notorious in history for its beauty and the crimes it had provoked, now gleamed before us, the answer to the riddle of the 6 Napoleons. Beppo lay glaring at us, his teeth bared in impotent rage, his dark eyes blazing with hatred and despair.
Inspector, the case is complete. Tomorrow we shall tell the tale in full. Tonight, let us secure both our prisoner and his prize.
Thus closed that evening's adventure, the pearl glittering on Holmes's palm, the criminal bound in Lestrade's custody, And I awed once more at how my friend had seen in fragments of plaster the outline of human greed, crime, and history. The night air of reading had grown still and almost oppressively warm in the drawing room where we H. had confined Beppo. Holmes sat in his usual chair, the black pearl of the Borgias resting in a velvet case upon the table before him, I notebook in hand, and Lestrade pacing nervously waited for the master to elucidate the remarkable events we had witnessed.
Inspector Watson, we have before us the sum of an intricate and singularly curious case. Whence, that is at first glance, a series of busts shattered by some lunatic might seem trivial. Yet, observe what detail reveals.
Holmes tapped a finger against the table, his gaze intense, and began to speak with the measured clarity that always fascinated me.
Beppo was employed by Gelder Co. as a statuary worker, casting busts of Napoleon. Before his imprisonment, he stole the famous Black Pearl, a jewel of inestimable value. He found it necessary to hide the pearl in a place beyond suspicion. What better hiding place than a common plaster bust, ordinary, unremarkable, yet capable of holding a small treasure?
I nodded, marveling at the simplicity of the scheme, even as I realized how easily the criminal might lose the object if circumstances turned against him.
Beppo selected 6 busts of the emperor, hollowed one of them with exquisite care, and secreted the pearl inside. The busts were sold each to a different purchaser to scatter the trail and confuse any pursuers.
Lestrade, though accustomed to crime, frowned thoughtfully.
A clever hiding place, yes. But what of the smashing, Mr. Holmes? Surely he did not go about breaking all the others.
Therein lies the subtlety. Beppo returned from prison to retrieve his treasure, unaware in which of the 6 busts it had been placed. He commenced a methodical search, smashing each bust in turn. His frenzy left 4 shattered before he discovered the true one at Reading. The man in Chiswick, slain by another criminal, was a confederate or rival who also sought the jewel.
I shuddered at the thought of the man's violent end, crushed by his own folly. Hey,
Observe, Watson. Every action led logically to the next. The murder in Chiswick was incidental, a violent convergence of 2 parties pursuing the same aim. The first man was not Beppo, though his fury mirrored that of our Italian workman. Beppo, restrained by circumstance and skill, avoided detection until now.
Holmes, I confess I would never have traced such a line of reasoning. The mere thought of following plaster fragments to a jewel would not have occurred to me.
Yet it is elementary, Watson. Observe, a man's acts betray his motive. The smashing was not senseless, it was directed. The distribution of busts, the peculiar selection of purchasers, the timing, all are data. By methodical analysis, we infer the presence of a hidden object, the likely location, and the identity of the criminal.
I took careful notes, attempting to reproduce his logic in my own mind, though I feared my understanding lagged behind the rapid sweep of Holmes's deduction.
Now, consider the murders, the injuries, the blood. Every detail corroborates the presence of human desire driven to extremes. The Chiswick victim, for instance, bore a stab wound and traces of plaster dust upon his clothing. His presence at the shattered bust indicates he too sought the pearl, and his death confirms the danger inherent in such covetous pursuits.
James, it is remarkable how you read the past from the present. Each fragment of evidence, blood, plaster, footprints, tells the story.
Precisely. And see here, Inspector. Holmes lifted the black pearl, letting it catch the lamplight. A single error in judgment, a misplaced step, a hesitation, all serve to illuminate the path of the criminal. Beppo underestimated the speed of pursuit and the vigilance of observation. He believed the pearl could be reclaimed by brute force, and here we have him.
And the remaining 4 busts, Holmes, they are all destroyed?
Yes, Inspector. Their destruction served no purpose beyond eliminating decoys. The remaining bust at Sandiford's home was safe, untouched by fortunate coincidence or foresight. Thus, by chance or providence, the pearl came into our hands with minimal loss.
Charmers. Holmes's fingers traced the outline of the pearl's smooth surface. I could see that the gleam of triumph, though subtle, played about his sharp features.
Watson, consider the lesson here. Crime often appears chaotic and irrational. Yet beneath, there is reason, however concealed. Observation, inference, and patience are the keys. Beppel's crime seems simple, a man smashing plaster busts, but it concealed cunning greed and the lure of a priceless gem. Our task was to see through appearances.
Holmes, you make it sound almost poetic. The violence, the risk, the jewel, all dancing together.
Poetry in crime, Watson, lies not in the act, but in the logic. One observes, one reasons, one deduces. The rest blood, fear, passion follows as consequence.
Lestrade, more accustomed to tangible results than subtle reasoning, nodded.
Well, Mr. Holmes, I must admit, this case has taught me patience. I am glad to see the villain in custody and the pearl recovered. Scotland Yard owes you much.
Patience, Inspector, observation, and a willingness to follow wherever the facts lead. That is the lesson.
We spent the remainder of the evening securing Beppo and arranging for his transport to London under, proper guard. Holmes examined every fragment of the shattered busts once more, noting even the smallest chips.
Notice, Watson, how each fragment bears the imprint of its destruction, yet together they tell a story of human folly and desire. These shards, though mere plaster, are chronicles of ambition, greed, and desperation.
It urges humbling to realize how the smallest details, fragments, scratches, traces, can reveal the truth of life and death.
Indeed, Watson, crime is seldom plain. It is the mixture of human weakness and cunning that creates mystery. The detective's task is to separate the components, trace the motion of human will through the chaos, and discern the inevitable pattern.
As I wrote down his words, the night deepened. Beppo slept fitfully under guard, unaware that his prize had been recovered and that the course of his crime had been traced from the workshops of Stepney to the drawing rooms of Reading. Holmes leaned back, pipe in hand, and for the first time that evening allowed a faint smile to touch his lips.
Watson, I always find it instructive to see how human nature will work with consistency. Greed drives a man to risk all, yet it also betrays him in the end. Observation and reason are the twin lights that reveal his path. The 6 Napoleons are no longer mere plaster. They are the chronicles of desire, ambition, and folly.
And so the night closed around us, cause London, silent and still beyond the walls of our temporary lodgings, the pearl resting in safety, the criminal secured, and my admiration for Holmes deepened beyond expression. In truth, I understood once again that crime, no matter how intricate, is always bound by the laws of human behavior, and, in Holmes's hands, observation and reason are instruments as sharp and sure as any blade. Concluded, Part 4 of the singular case of the 6 Napoleons, where shattered plaster, Baster, cunning men, and a priceless gem intersected to test our wits, patience, and courage. The morning sun rose over Reading in a pale, diffuse light, casting long shadows across the streets and lending a quiet solemnity to the day. Holmes was already awake when I descended to the sitting room, pacing with restless energy. Beside him, Lestrade reviewed the papers concerning Beppo's previous imprisonment.
Watson, the game is nearly complete. Last night we recovered the pearl and secured the criminal. Today we must ensure the final arrangements. Beppo must be returned to London, arraigned, and every question concerning the stolen property must be resolved. Even the smallest detail matters, for the law is meticulous.
I nodded, feeling the weight of the case settle upon me. Though the excitement had been keen, there was a satisfaction in seeing justice rendered, even through the subtle instruments of deduction and reasoning, rather than the sword or the gun.
I must admit, Mr. Holmes, your methods always leave me astonished. The ordinary course of police work rarely matches your insight. Beppo, the pearl, the broken busts. Who would have imagined such a sequence of events?
That, Inspector, is the difference between observation and mere perception. One sees, one deduces. The rest is a matter of patience.
We set forth toward the station, Beppo bound in the back of the cab, Saig, his dark eyes flashing with fear and fury. He was silent at first, then began to mutter incoherently, as though trying to reason his way out of a trap that he had only himself constructed.
It was mine. All mine. No one can take it from me. You cannot. You cannot.
Silence, Beppo. Every act has a consequence. The pearl you sought is recovered. Your efforts to retrieve it by smashing plaster and spilling blood have brought you only to this point.
Beppo's hands clenched, white knuckles gripping the edge of the seat, yet there was no escape. Holmes's reasoning had foreseen every step he might take, and Lestrade's firm grip ensured that the criminal could go nowhere. As we arrived at the raiding station, the officials prepared to take Beppo into custody. Holmes handed over the black pearl to Lestrade, who inspected it with awe, then carefully placed it into evidence.
Remarkable. Never have I seen such a treasure retrieved through so circuitous a route.
Circuitous, yes, Inspector, but inevitable when human desire is directed with such consistency. Observe, Watson, the criminal's path, though seemingly erratic, followed predictable patterns once the principle of motivation is understood. Greed and necessity are universal. The methods of detection lie in observing these constants.
The morning passed in a blur of paperwork, official statements, and the collection of evidence. Holmes, ever meticulous, examined each shard of plaster one final time, noting the fracture lines and the manner in which each had been destroyed.
Even in destruction, there is evidence. Each fragment bears the signature of the hand that broke it, the energy employed, the intent behind the blow. One must study it as a historian studies an artifact. Only then does the past speak clearly.
As the afternoon waned, we returned to Baker Street. Holmes, uncharacteristically quiet, sank into his chair by the fire, pipe in hand. I, ever eager to record every detail, sat nearby, pondering the events that had unfolded with a mixture of awe and exhaustion. Holmes, do you ever tire of such cases? The pattern recognition, the danger, the constant observation?
Tire? On the contrary, Watson, each case is a new puzzle, a new demonstration of the laws of human behavior. It is the irregularity that excites me, the deviation from expectation that can be traced, once properly understood, to motive and circumstance.
And in this case, the broken busts, the theft of the pearl, it all seems so ordinary when stated plainly, yet so extraordinary in its consequences.
Ordinary, yes, in materials and instruments, extraordinary in the human passions that animate them. That is the paradox of criminal investigation. Huh?
The evening descended, the room warm with lamplight, and Holmes leaned back, fingers steepled, gazing into the fire as though seeing beyond the flames.
Consider, Watson, how often minor acts conceal grander intentions, ad hoc intentions, bias, the destruction of plaster, the risk of prison, the spilling of blood, all seem trivial until viewed through the lens of purpose. It is this lens that separates the detective from the ordinary observer.
And yet, Holmes, it is your ability to discern motive and consequence from the smallest detail that astounds me most. How does one train the mind to such acuity?
Observation, reflection, and a refusal to accept anything at face value. Every object, every word, every gesture contains information. One must see, infer, and then verify.
I reflected upon the events of the past week, the smashed busts, the frantic search, the murder in Chiswick, the recovered pearl, and I felt a deep admiration for my friend. To him, the world was a series of puzzles waiting to be solved. To me, it was both a wonder and a lesson in human complexity. Lestrade, ever practical, rose to take his leave.
I must admit, Mr. Holmes, I am grateful. Scotland Yard would have been chasing shadows for months without your insight. Beppo and the pearl case closed.
Case closed, Inspector, but observe the lesson. Crime may appear random, yet when one understands human motive, it reveals itself as a predictable sequence. The detective's task is to perceive, infer, and anticipate.
As the door closed behind Lestrade, Holmes and I remained in our familiar quiet, the city sounds muted in the evening stillness. Holmes, I said at last, I should write this account carefully. The case of the six Napoleons, the hidden pearl, and the criminal's Beppo, it shall be recorded for posterity. Few will guess how ordinary objects conceal extraordinary consequences.
And that is why, Watson, you observe and report while I deduce. Together, we bring clarity to confusion. Remember, the world is full of details, yet only by reasoning can their significance be understood.
I made my notes by the fire, the black pearl gleaming under the lamp, the shattered plaster fragments lying silent upon the table. London, in all its vast teeming complexity, seemed both smaller and infinitely more intricate after the revelations of the day. In the quiet of Baker Street, I reflected upon human nature, how desire, greed, and curiosity intertwine to create both crime and consequence. Holmes, seated in contemplative silence, seemed already absorbed in some new mystery, his eyes distant yet alight with the familiar fire of inquiry. And so, the singular adventure of the six Napoleons came to its conclusion, a criminal unmasked, John Atla, a priceless treasure recovered, and a lesson in deduction rendered with precision. I sat beside Holmes, pen in hand, understanding once more that while crime may unfold in darkness, the light of reason will always reveal its path. The lamps burned low, the city slept, and I knew that Baker Street had once again witnessed the triumph of intellect over passion, observation over chaos, and reason over the folly of man.
Watson, another case concluded. But remember, where one shadow falls, many more remain. There will always be mysteries to illuminate.
And with that, I laid down my pen, the account complete, and looked across the room at my friend, the indomitable Sherlock Holmes, Budbellis Amai, whose brilliance transformed even the humblest bust of Napoleon into a story of intrigue, danger, and revelation.